I do agree with him in that the demand is real and it is just the beginning. Just like it was during the dot-com bubble, internet is real. It pushed us into the digital era and it's got very long runway that changed our lives forever. So AI is real, but what price do you pay for that kind of stock? So I think it's very reflective, as you can see, that the stock has moved up. But on the flip side, someone like an ASML just 2 days ago, you see share prices down almost 20%. So rising tides like AI doesn't necessarily lift all boats. So I think we need to be selective. And TSMC just really happens to have all stars line up for them in terms of having AI, gaining share in terms of on Apple and the smartphone chain as well. And also not to mention, they're actually taking substantial share with Intel outsourcing to TSMC. And also Samsung is losing share. So it's really one of those stories where I think is unique. Only TSMC can seem to be able to do this. But in terms of the overall AI party, I'd still say it is at 3 a.m., meaning that if you look at net flows, it's quite interesting that only inflows have seen towards TSMC in Taiwan, whereas the rest of the market have actually seen foreigners pulling money out of Taiwan. So it's not as if all Taiwanese stocks are moving up today.
No, of course. And the case in point is that TSMC year-to-date has gained 84%. That completely gets dwarfed out when you look at NVIDIA's performance this year from a year-to-date perspective, given that Taiwan is the contract manufacturer for a lot of the NVIDIA AI chips. But what I want to understand from you, and of course, it's 30% on the TAIEX, weighted average, that is. What I want to understand from you, Britney, is despite the numbers looking strong, despite the forecast looking promising, there's still a valuation gap between NVIDIA being the chip designer and TSMC being the mass chip manufacturer, this high-scale chip manufacturer. And so when and how would that valuation gap get reconciled? And what, to your mind, is really fair value for TSMC from these levels at 23,613?
It's such a good question, Tanvir, because when we look at it, both have very unique positioning within the supply chain. TSMC being pretty much leading in terms of foundry, being asked as well whether they're a monopoly in terms of leading nodes. So I think that's where it gives it the pricing power and why it's trading at 5 times price to book and over 20 times PE. And the key thing is, as a shareholder, the return on equity, you're looking at over 30%, whereas NVIDIA is almost double of that. So the gross margin in that sense is still a ways gap. I think that's what CC Wei said on the call as well, is that despite everything that they beat on, their gross margin is now 58. Whereas NVIDIA, you're still looking north of 70. So there is a gap in the price, therefore, should reflect that difference. And NVIDIA is the innovator that designs the chip and then passes it on to TSMC. I think for me, where I sit in terms of valuation is at 5.5 times price to book is really pushing it. So I think about 15 to 20% upside from here is pretty much capping it from my perspective. Because if I really have to put it in long term as well, is your utilization rate for TSMC now up to 86% in fourth quarter. There's really only that much higher you can go when you still have non-AI weighing upon the overall tech and semi sector. So I think it's important to put things into perspective, that not to get too carried away other than the AI perspective.